Blog Talk Radio.
All right, welcome. I'm your host, Tarhaka Mental, and tonight we are dealing with the grand finale of mental cognitive dissonance. Those who believe they are black in America, and this is going to be the final episode of this right here. I tried to get out a whole lot of information ahead of time, and I just didn't have time enough to put everything that I wanted to say, or everything that I wanted to present until I'm coming to the end. I just got to stop. That's just bottom line, and that's just it. I'm going to the commercials. Y'all hold on. I'll be right back. Let me make sure I got this right. You have a mortgage. You were told the bank would give you a loan for your home. But when you got to the bank, they didn't give you anything or sign anything. But presto changeo, you have a new mortgage. Then you find out your mortgage has been sold to another company you don't know and don't have any contract with. It seems to me something is wrong. When you walked out the bank, you had some papers in your hand, but no check. Let's get to the bottom, down to the bottom of this kind of stuff. Go to TarhakaDebtElimination.org. That's TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Let's bring the fraud to a close. How about that? This kind of stuff is going on all over the United States, but most people don't even understand what to do about it. TarhakaDebtElimination.org. All right, we're back. Now, let's talk about this for a minute. Have you ever wondered why is it that people all over the United States, especially people who look like me, when they get to a certain level financially in their life, they go buy a Cadillac. Why don't you say, well, I ain't finna buy no Cadillac. I'm going and buy an automobile. I'm going to buy a Chevrolet. I'm going to buy a Ford. You know, what is it about people? And I'm talking about people all over the United States that don't matter what color you is, what your nationality is. It don't matter. You by some hook or crook, you always go, especially if you got money, so well, I got to get a Cadillac. Why? What is it about this particular automobile that my people think that they got to get that there? What is it about that particular automobile? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put you up on a little bit, and then you understand some things. Hold on a minute.
Have you ever wondered why African Americans love Cadillac so much? Or did you know that Martin Luther King applied for a concealed handgun permit? Well, those are the two stories that we're going to talk about today. And if you would like to ask your own questions about African Americans, you can do so at onemichistory.com in the contacts page. Also, if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so on my Buy Me Coffee on my Patreon page in the description below. Give us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and support the YouTube channel. But without further ado, let's get started. Have you ever wondered why black people love Cadillacs? For African Americans, Cadillacs were not just a popular brand, but they became a symbol of success and pride. And as it turns out, Cadillacs didn't become a fan favorite of African Americans by accident. During the beginning of the 20th century, cars began to enter the American landscape. During that period, car makers started to pop up all over the place. In 1903 alone, 57 companies were established, but shortly thereafter, 27 of them went bankrupt. Cadillac, though, is one of the oldest and longest surviving brands in automotive history, having entered the market as General Motors' luxury brand in 1903. The brand was almost an immediate success and quickly developed a reputation for excellence in the automotive community because of their design and engineering. And, of course, they didn't sell to black people. Cadillac was General Motors' top-of-the-line and most expensive product, but the company had an unwritten rule of not selling its cars to black customers. But the Great Depression started to devastate the automotive market. Luxury manufacturers such as Cadillac faced a substantial decline in sales. In 1928, General Motors produced 1,700,000 vehicles, with 41,000 of them being Cadillacs. But by 1933, the production had dropped to just 780,000 vehicles, with only 7,000 of them being Cadillacs. That is a decline of 84%. And as the economy began to downturn, so did affluent white consumers. GM's executive committee would gather together in a meeting to make a decision on the future of the Cadillac division, who was losing so much money that they had plans to close the division down. Unexpectedly, Nicholas Drysdale, who was uninvited and in charge of GM's service department nationwide, knocked on the door and asked if he could just be heard for 10 minutes. The executive committee granted his request. Drysdale stated that he had a plan to make Cadillac profitable in 18 months. While traveling around the country and visiting different service departments, he had observed a significant number of African Americans in the service department at Cadillac dealership. They were members of the small African American elite: boxers, entertainers, lawyers, doctors, and ministers, but they were not allowed to buy a new car in the showroom. Drysdale found out that blacks were paying white frontmen $300 to purchase the cars for them. He asked the question, why should these men get several $100s to profit that should go to General Motors? So he proposed a radical idea to target the African-American elite by marketing a special Cadillac for them. He believed that would be an important step towards Cadillac becoming a profitable business. By targeting the African-American elite, he could increase their presence in the luxury market and build a relationship with a new customer base. Drysdale urged the executive committee to go after the African-American market, or at least allow them to come into the showroom. GM would accept Drysdale's suggestion, and he would play a major role in the increased sales of Cadillac during the 1930s. While the Great Depression was still in full swing, in 1934, Cadillac sales rose 70%, leading to GM to sell enough vehicles to make the Cadillac division break even that year. Furthermore, from 1933 to 1941, sales increased from 6,000 units to 66,000 units. That is an increase of almost tenfold. So on June 10th of 1934, Drysdale was promoted to general manager of the Cadillac division. Now, Drysdale's initiative ending their racist sales policy in the 1930s apparently did not carry over to Cadillac's marketing division. The division wanted dealers to stop turning away black customers, but it did very little to actually attract them. With the resurgence of the economy in the post-World War II era, Cadillac's print and television advertisements during that period continued to define excellence as white. This exclusionary advertising would extend all the way to the 1970s, with Cadillac portraying a world of glamour and excellence that only comprised of white people. But Cadillac wasn't the only one, because most automotive manufacturers during that time had advertisements that were completely white during the same time period. Additionally, individual car dealers maintained a significant degree of control over their showroom. According to renowned automotive journalist Warren Brown, his mother was unsuccessful in her attempt to purchase a new Cadillac from a dealership in New Orleans in the 1960s. However, she would ultimately be able to acquire her desired car, a 1965 Coupe de Ville, from a white man in a different location. Cadillac's diversity in marketing division served as a model for other divisions of General Motors and other automotive companies. This trend was primarily motivated by money more than morality. So that's how Cadillac became the first luxury car brand to intentionally market to black consumers. And in this case, Cadillac's acknowledgement literally saved them from bankruptcy. Martin Luther King used to carry a weapon and even apply for a concealed handgun permit. In January of 1956, after his house was firebombed, Dr. Martin Luther King applied to the local sheriff for a concealed handgun permit. However, he was denied on the grounds that he was deemed unsuitable. Family members and friends were concerned for King's safety and urged him to hire a bodyguard or at least an armed watchman. But after a meeting with Bayard Rustin to show his support for the Montgomery bus boycott, the meeting would forever change King and the civil rights movement. King had read the philosophy of pacifism, but he had not yet embraced it into his life. When Bayard Rustin arrived in Montgomery, Dr. King and Coretta owned a gun, but Bayard Rustin's influence encouraged them to reconsider and accept pacifism as a way of life. King came to the realization that it would be hypocritical for him to carry a weapon even for his own protection, stating, "How could I serve as a leader of a nonviolent movement and at the same time use a weapon of violence for my own protection?" Harry Blaffler was a proponent of the eugenics movement and wrote the Model Eugenical Sterilization Law, which passed in Virginia on the same day as the Racial Integrity Act of 1924. This law allowed for the forced sterilization of individuals in state institutions under the assumption that it would be beneficial for them and for society. Concurrently, the Racial Integrity Act required the Virginia Bureau of Vital Statistics to document the race of each newborn and made it illegal for white and non-white partners to wed. Collectively, these laws were meant to purify the white race. Eugenics was derived from the Greek word well and born, and it was a philosophical term of selective breeding that strives to remove undesirable qualities by hindering certain people from having children. Sir Francis Galton generated the term in 1883, portraying eugenics as the study of the influences that can advance or damage the hereditary qualities of future generations physically and mentally. As eugenics gained widespread support in the United States at the beginning of the 20th century, many states began to authorize doctors to forcibly sterilize their patients. When the Supreme Court upheld Virginia's eugenical sterilization law in Buck v. Bell in 1927, Virginia's law became the model of the rest of the country and facilitated the forced sterilization of more than 60,000 men and women nationwide. Virginia's law later was co-opted by Germany during World War II and was relied upon as a precedent for their race purity programs. After World War II, eugenical theory was heavily criticized, but the sterilization programs persisted long after the end of World War II. Thank you. I'm your host, Country Boy. This has been One Mic History. I'm going to continue with this mini-series, and if you have questions or you just want to leave your comments, like I said, you can do so at onemichistory.com in the contact page. Thank you for listening, and peace.
Okay, we back. Now, let's go on down. I got to make my announcement. On October the 26th, right here in Jacksonville, Florida, we will be doing the Black Vegan Fest. Okay? All you have to do is just show up. It don't cost you no money. We just show up, and we're going to have visitors and all that, so you might want to bring a few dollars so you can take some stuff with you. But it don't cost you to step upon the land and come up in here and see what we are doing down here and see how we plant the food, how we teaching the children how to plant and grow, plant live bands, professional chefs and cooking and going on. You got to be here October the 26th. 2024, the Black Vegan Fest. All you got to do is just type it in the Google, and you will see what I'm trying to tell you. Okay? Now, what we're going to do now, so we just found out about Dr. Martin Luther King and private holding a weapon and the other stuff about Cadillac, so you know where it came from. I just told it to you. Okay? Y'all on a minute. We're going to get on down and start bringing in the heavyweights. Hold on.
It is again my pleasure to introduce our next speaker. Now, I was one of those little kids. I was so small when I was young that I didn't get to go to school till I was 7 years old because my parents wouldn't let me go to school because I was too small. And I grew up in a blue-collar town where you had to fight, as everybody worked in the steel mills. Everybody was uneducated, just about, and so I started school late. And I knew I was smart because I could read when I went to school. I don't know how I learned that, but I could read when I got there. And I thought I was smart all the way through school until I went to the University of Chicago to get my PhD. Then I met some really smart people, like Barbara Sizemore. And I have been humble from that day forward. Barbara Sizemore picked up a book in Latin and started reading it when she was in high school. They had no instruction in it at all. Barbara Sizemore went to Northwestern University in the days when you could not live on the campus of Northwestern University, and graduated from Northwestern University summa cum laude in classics when she was 19. Okay? That's when I found out what it meant to be really smart. Okay? We were the only two African Americans in a special program at the University of Chicago when I first met her, and it gave me the appropriate humility about learning and about brightness from then on. Barbara earned her PhD at the University of Chicago, as I did. She had distinguished career as an educator in elementary and secondary education. She taught everything at every level. She was an elementary principal, one of the outstanding ones in Chicago, and against my advice, took a tough high school in Chicago and turned it around. The superintendent promised her that he was going to give her the resources that she needed to do it. I told her he was lying. I was right. She took the school anyway, and she turned it around and all of that. She became superintendent in Washington, D.C. She finished one phase of her career at Pitt, where she became a department chairman, a professor in several departments, and director of research, and thought she was going to retire and write books. However, the president of DePaul University in Chicago knew about Barbara and talked her out of retirement, told her to come and take over the deanship of the College of Education, and he would back her because their number one priority was to improve public education in Chicago. Barbara came out, she took it, she just retired from the second phase of her career and is getting ready to start the third phase of her career in education now. She is a tireless advocate for poor people. She is a tireless advocate for black children and youth getting the kind of quality education they need. And it is my great pleasure to present to you my friend and colleague and one of the brightest people I have ever met in my life, Barbara Sizemore.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 5 minutes to 10. I was supposed to start at 9:40. I'm a university professor programmed for 50 minutes. I'm going to do my best not to do that. There are certain characteristics of the African American community which have been consistent throughout my adult years. Last year I celebrated my 50th year as a teacher in the United States of America. These consistencies are: racism, or the belief in white supremacy, has been relentless and persistent throughout these 50 years. The absence of unity among African Americans in their pursuit of freedom and equality has been consistent. And the belief in education and God as the preferred means for that pursuit has steadily diminished. When I was a young girl in the 1930s and 1940s, African Americans, we were called Negroes or colored people then, had strong convictions about the pursuit of freedom and equality, which Reverend Flake has talked about this morning from his parents. My parents, born in the vicious years of Jim Crow, 1905 and 1907, when Negroes were lynched, and Mary McLeod Bethune once thought there was a chance for President Roosevelt to pass an anti-lynching law. But it never happened. But my parents fought against apartheid and Jim Crow because they believed in God and education. They believed in that old song, I shall not be moved. I shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's standing by the water, I shall not be moved. And they had faith in God and the future. As you know, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And this faith bolsters self-confidence and lifts self-esteem, but more than anything else, it nourishes the human spirit. And friends, it pays to be intelligent. Nobody wants to be dumb. But it is the human spirit that overcomes obstacles, like poverty, like racism, and sexism. There are 5 levers of power in a capitalist democracy: God, dollars, votes, knowledge, and guns. African Americans have all of these. All of these. And what keeps us from being successful is the lack of a unity among us to persist and stand like the tree by the water. I call this a degeneration of our spirit. And we must get it back. In 1997, Bernie Watson states in his book, Colored Black Negro Chasing the American Dream, says this: a different reality has set in at this writing. The African American community is now well represented in positions of power and responsibility. Look at us. Look at us. Look at us. Yet problems remain. Simultaneously, the country appears to be tired of confronting problems, and many political leaders seem eager to return to the good old days of intact families, quiet small towns, good education, jobs for everyone, and perfect harmony. These good old days never existed. That dimly remembered past is only a fantasy. The opposition, end of quote, the opposition to racism has caved in, as Bernie tells us in his book. Racism through Jim Crow relegated Negroes to poverty then as now, and preventing poverty will require redefinitions and a redistribution of opportunity for all people. These are the future challenges of public education. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a little bit of control over public education. We have absolutely no control over private education. None. The reason we do not understand this is because we do not understand capitalism. Look. We say and teach our children that we fight wars for democracy. Stop telling this lie to your children. We don't fight wars for democracy, we fight wars for capitalism. That is what is the essence of the American dream. The dollars have in God we trust on them, but it's not God we spend. It's not God we save. Your human spirit is not in your bank account. I'm not against dollars, don't get me wrong. But that's not where your heart is. And where your heart is where your treasure is. Right? You can have money and be poor. Oh yeah, I know people who got plenty of money. It's in a $40,000 Lexus in the garage. It's in $10,000 fur coats, $20,000 diamond rings. But money is important. And if you're going to make it in the United States, if we're going to make it as a group in the United States of America, we got to better understand capitalism and what it means, because that is the essence. I want to thank Bernie Watson and Mona Risco for recommending me to participate in this very important conference, because the future of public education must be responsive to the needs of capitalism now that capitalism is the dominant economic system in the world. And you must understand that capitalism means that it's an economic system which guarantees that the goods and services, the ownership and distribution of goods and services is private. That's privately owned. It's privately owned. It's privately owned. It's privately owned. If I own the company, my son does not have to take a test to be vice president. The future of public education must be responsive to capitalism. And if we as a people are going to survive, we must be responsive to capitalism, or we will die in the prison system which has been constructed to contain African American men, especially now that they are armed. The future of public education must also be responsive to the changing demographics in the United States. Oh, Reverend Flake is so right. Let your children learn to speak Spanish. For God's sake, let your children learn to speak Spanish. They're going to have to talk to Spanish-speaking people. Some of these Spanish-speaking people are black. Puerto Ricans are citizens, and many Mexican Americans are. Now, the chief goal of capitalism is to make a profit by any means necessary. So these 4 tiers that Reverend Flake talked about in public schools are going to just merely replicate themselves in private schools. They're going to be the schools that cost $20,000. So if the state gives you a $7,000 voucher, you got to come up with $13,000 to get in that high-tier school. Then there are going to be schools that cost just $15,000. Then you got to come up with $8,000. Then there are going to be schools that cost $12,000. Then you got to come up with $5,000. And then there are going to be schools that cost $7,000 and less. Guess who's going to be in those schools? No, ladies and gentlemen, we made a big mistake in desegregation. I tried hard to keep it from happening, but it couldn't happen. Oh, people get caricatures of me. Some of you are old enough to remember. I had my big bandana around my head, and here comes Aunt Jababra. I know you don't, some of you are too young, you don't remember that. But what I kept trying to tell people is we can't buy into a desegregation policy that says that all black is all bad. We can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. And we cannot buy into a voucher system that says that you get $7,000 and you buy what you can. Can't buy it. Can't do it. Can't do it. We can't do it. We can't do it. We got to think this thing through carefully. Oh, I agree with Reverend Flake that we need to debate this issue. I'm not here to be an apologist for public schools, but I do want to tell you that public schools can be better. They can be better. Now, generally, as African Americans, we're very confused about the economic system and capitalism. We don't talk too much about how you make money and less about how you keep it. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn. It doesn't mean that we can't learn. And it doesn't mean that we can't teach our children. The main areas of concern in private and public education for African Americans are accountability. That is, how do we know that every American knows what she or she should know? How do we know that every school is reaching that goal? We call that accreditation. How do we know that school employees are reaching this goal? That is certification, experience. You got a lot of private schools and parochial schools in Chicago that hire people who are not even certified to teach. Governance. Who should rule and how? Who should determine what is taught to whom and how? Curriculum. What should every American know? How should every American be taught? And finance. How should schools be financed and who pays? Those are the questions. Last, how are teachers recruited and principals and people who work in public schools? Ron Edmonds said in the 1970s, we know everything we need to know to teach all of the children of all of the people, especially if their education is important to us. I stand here before you to tell you there are mountains of data, ladies and gentlemen, mountains of data of public schools where people like you and me are in them teaching our children and where our children are passing these tests, as my grandmother used to say. Let me tell you about some of them that I've recently worked with. Last year, Kelman Corporate Community School. This was a cool school that the corporations took over. They took it over. It was a private school funded by Joseph Kelman Corporation, and they couldn't teach the kids to learn, so they gave it back to the public school system. Hello? Last year, Kelman Corporate Community School reached the 50th percentile in mathematics, increasing from 40th percentile in 1995 and the 51st percentile in reading on ITBS from the 25th percentile in 1995. It was the first school that we worked with at DePaul in the school achievement structure to do so. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring these all black, all Hispanic schools up from the 9th and 10th percentile to the 50th percentile. Just make them normal schools because we believe the children in them are normal children.
Okay, we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Dr. Barbara Sizemore. And in my personal opinion, I don't think she said anything wrong. I think she said everything right. I'm going to open up the line at area code 414. 404. You're on the air. Tell us who you are.
Yes.
Where you're
Can you hear
calling
me?
from. Yeah, I can hear you.
Yes. I'm calling from Jacksonville, Florida. My name is Master Musa.
Okay,
That's
my brother.
acronym. Yes, how you doing?
I'm doing just fine, Stanley.
Yes, sir.
What is it that you want to tell us about your experience with the school system in the state of Florida and where we are right here in Jacksonville, Florida? Is it anything that you think that we need to know about before it changes?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
First of all, African Americans need to teach African Americans, especially in Florida at the present time, where she brought up about this the voucher. That can be worked out. It's not just about the amount of money that's available, because African Americans just for Jacksonville alone spend over $20 billion. Yes. So it can't be about money. It has to be about leadership. And for African Americans, you can go all the way back to 1930 when you can go back to 1930 for the miseducation of the Negro. It talks about that. Same. Yes. Same thing. And after all this time, since post-civil rights, no, let's go back to Jim Crow, pro-civil rights, to the present. African Americans haven't done anything to change the education system for themselves. All nationalities not Jacksonville, but in this country, all nationalities teach their own children. Now, there's two types of education. There's school book, and then That's the number one education is what you learn at home. That's the first and the primary teacher. But for when it comes to African Americans, you look in the school, the majority of the school, African Americans and other nationalities are the majority in Jacksonville. But when it comes to the school system, African Americans are the majority. But most of the teachers are Caucasian. That's crazy. Especially when you have a history of Jacksonville as being racist. That's something I say, that's a fact. So one thing I'm talking about, and plus I'm at the school board over 20 years going to the school board meetings. I'm civic engaged. What I see, the number one problem for African Americans is leadership. African American leadership is a colossal failure. Yes. Number two, it's not what I go for when it comes to the education, it's the parents. Take that off the student. Would the child look up, and if they see nothing, they do nothing. Thank you.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this right here. So now, what you are saying is that you don't see any significant, real solid significance of something that's engaged in the investment in people of African descent inside Jacksonville, Florida.
When we talk about education, there's no investment when it comes to education.
Okay. All right. Now, because I know now, they had this budget thing come up where we got millions and millions and dollars that's going to improve the Jaguar Stadium for football, but the Jaguar Stadium is right next door. They are connected to East Side, and I know this for a fact because I helped build this stadium. And the budget was supposed to include funding for the East Side to build it up, along with the building up of the changing and modification of the Jaguar Stadium. But here goes somebody jumped up in there for the good old boy network and say we need to keep this separated and we'll deal with the Jaguar Stadium, and then the over on the east side, we're going to deal with that later on, but let's concentrate everything on Jaguar Stadium. Then they came out and said we have allocated X amount of $1 million over on another side of town where we creating and going to build a pickleball court, tennis court, skateboard area, and so on and so forth. Now, what I want to know now is how many of our people play pickleball? How many of our people are involved in skateboarding? How many of our people is doing what you're going to already allocate and they have already started building? And you got the east side off the table, and now you're thinking about building up Jaguar Stadium. It seems to me that something is wrong. What you think about that, man?
Well, what you call, I'm in the room to all that's taking place, what you just mentioned. I'm in the room. So let me help you out. When it comes to the Jaguar, you can say the Jaguars were doing the right thing. I got data to back it up. The Jaguars, this is very important. The Jaguars were doing the right thing. They was going to put up, work with the city to do $160 million. When we go to the city council, that Ron Shellum, he was the president during that time. Now he's just a city council, but he's over finance. And then you got the guy at the beach, city council, Diamond. They calling the shots. They are the present day pork chop gangs. I will explain to you who they are. Well, you call them billboards. Well, yeah, they the present day pork chop. The pork chop started back there doing consolidation. But I'll talk about that a minute. Then when we come back around, when they talk about the east side, really they should be just talking about A. Philip Randolph. When they say east side, the east side from the river all the way down to the line, to the state line. Yes. And a lot of people don't realize that. What we talking about is the urban core, downtown, and east side. All that money should go to the east side. Yes. Now, when it comes to talking about going over there to the north side over there, Sutel and all that, I don't know who come up with that. This is the first time I ever heard that before, about that. And if they're talking about it, they're talking about North Jacksonville. Yeah, when it comes to that. So my summary for this whole thing is, I hold the citizens over there on the east side responsible because they are discombobulated. It's about 5 to 10 of them, but they don't work together. And then they waited, I'm talking about the African Americans over there on the east side, waited to the last minute downtown City Hall to show up, to participate. We have a track record. Yeah, we have a track record of being reactive to everything than being proactive. And that's one of the main problems with the A. Philip Randolph. But let me say this in closing, that this agreement has been going on for many years. This ain't the first time they ran this bamboozle. This is not the first time when it comes to this bamboozle, when it comes to that stadium. But it's the citizens over there on the east side, they got the problem. Thank you.
All right, now, I'm tell you something, man. You heard of the Good Old Boy Network right here in Jacksonville, Florida. And they jumped up and said that we finna get rid of the Good Old Boy Network. Has the Good Old Boy Network gone away, in your opinion?
No, that'll never go away. It's embedded into America. So from the national level to the state level to the local level, they're talking about Jacksonville. No, the only time, the opportunity that you have with Donald Deegan, because when it comes to the Democrats, they are just like the Republicans. Yes. And then you have it still boils down to the African American, because you have a large percentage of African Americans in the city that don't participate in the process. And I'm not talking about everybody when it comes to civic engagement. When it comes to civic engagement, you don't have 100 people. Really, you don't have about 5 people to show up, and I'm one of them. What you're saying here, I agree with you, but the most important part right now when it comes to Jacksonville, with Donald Deegan in place as the mayor, there's opportunities. But as Frederick Douglass said, if you don't make a demand, anybody will run over you, regardless of race.
All right, well, Now, I'm tell you something. I seen Donna before she married her husband. Woo,
Right.
she was pretty good. But we got another caller with a hand raised at area code 408. Hold on, man. Area code 408. You on the air? Tell us who you are, where you calling from, and what's your question or comment.
Okay, cool. Can you all hear me though?
Yeah, man, you come across loud and clear.
All right, so this is way busy over here in West Coast, California, you know what I'm saying? I'm just like a host, you know, I bring a lot to the table, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw something out there. I don't know if it's going to fit, you know what I'm saying? But you just never know where it's going to land, you know? But you got to put it out there in the atmosphere so people could take a look at it and see what they want to do with it, you know? Some people are going to turn around because they understand what you're saying. They're going to be reflecting what you be projecting and everything, but other people can be doing it. So I just hope we got more people on the good side. You understand?
All right, well, let me have it.
You know, they've been doing this stuff for a long time, man. You look way back. You go all the way back, man. You got to go all the way back. And when you go all the way back, you know what I'm saying? You're looking in the dark, man. You're looking in what happened in the world at that time with what people do and stuff. They had to dangle something out there to entice people to do something that was against people, you know? And so when people throw danglers out there, people bite, right? They find someone that bites. Whoever's biting on that is the one that's responsible for how this all went down in the first place. You know what I'm saying? Because, look, everybody's been doing this since everybody's been greedy as greedy can be, right? I mean, a lot of people will end up, you know, giving in to something, you know, especially when it's something that they want, whatever that might be. You know, what might be for some people, not for other people might not be the same thing what they're looking for. But if somebody's going to dangle something, it's going to be a carrot, right? To get some. Okay. So I'm just saying. So we just take a look at it from a perspective of that the responsibility of people's actions that they do under their circumstances that they're going through. A lot of people do things. Their circumstances dictate who they are rather than show them who they are. You know what I'm saying? So a lot of people will be making all these mistakes like this. I'm just giving you examples of what to look at so that you know what to look for. When you see this stuff, you know how to respond to it in a positive way where that puts you on top because you had to come down and break it down for these people that don't know how to solve problems. You understand what I'm saying?
All right, well, give me an example of what Stanley, because see, the brother that I'm on the line with, Stanley, me and him went to school together, and he down up in here, man. He all up in the stuff down here with all the heavyweights and stuff. Give me an example of what Stanley needs to do, man.
Well, you know, okay, I could, you know, I don't want to see, because I know he's sensitive, like just like you and I are sensitive people, especially when it comes to something that would be considered adversarial towards what we saying, right? I mean, after all, this is coming from the heart. You'd have to remember that part, you know what I'm saying? Otherwise, it ain't going to make sense, you know what I mean? A lot of people don't make sense, so you got to make sense for them. But the people that have been making sense for these people have been playing that game we talking about. I'm trying to help people to see, man, miss me with all that, because we ain't trying to do none of that. So I don't want to come out. I don't want him to think like I'm trying to outdo homie, you know, like tell him what to do, because I don't need to tell nobody what to do, man. Well, I can't tell you something you don't already know, you know, but I can remind you of who you are, you know what I'm saying? I can do that, but you know what I'm saying?
All right, well, I tell you what. Okay, hold on a minute. Stanley.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
What do you have to ask the brother on the line that's calling in? What question you got for him, man?
Well, the only thing I can say to him is he has a right to his opinion because he not on the ground level, so he can't really give a honest opinion about something he don't know about. He just giving.
Okay, all right.
I mean, he can't give facts. No, sorry about that. He can't give facts. Yeah.
All right. Well, wait a minute, bro. Stanley, can you Tell him who you are and your credentials and what you're doing, man. That you're activist, and tell him about it. Maybe he can address it from his position, because he calling us from the west. We in the east. Okay?
Yeah, I know that place. Yeah, I actually live there in Glendale, California. So yeah, great area. Yes, out there in L.A. I have to go check out the lake. Yes.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I just sit behind Jack Nicholson. Yes. On the
Oh my goodness.
floor. So like that. That's what I was
sweet,
doing.
bro. Sweet.
Yeah.
I love that, man. The mashed potato.
Yeah, well, the point there, I brought that up because, we are African American are monolithic on some things, but not everything in life. Some of us have been lived the good life all our life. Because sometimes when we speak, African Americans speak, they assume that we at the bottom. But anyway, going back to our point here, I understand what you're saying, and you have a right to your opinion.
Okay.
But we're talking about, hold on.
Okay.
When we come back to Jacksonville here, I'm in the room. So I'm not giving my opinion, I'm dealing with facts. The east side out there, who in the African American community, if they would just organize, if they just organize, they can get what they need. And they have to be from the bottom up.
But hold on, can I say one thing, please? Pretty please, man.
Yeah, come on, man.
Okay, look, I mean, because I love you, man. I love you like you wouldn't even believe, man. But I just want to say one thing, though. Back in 1993, I think it was, or something like that. I don't know. My mother died. She died when I was in prison and stuff, and it was kind of tough. But I remember one day, it was like today. It was a beautiful day, I was walking around the prison yard, and I ran into this dude, right? And I never met dude before. We just run into him, and he started talking to me. And his name was Geronimo Pratt. You know him?
What would you know about Pratt? Come on, man.
No, man. Listen, man. I ain't got time to mess around, dude. I don't mess around with nobody. Listen. I don't get nobody to listen enough, you know what I mean? It's hard to get someone to pay attention, you know what I'm saying? But when you got somebody's attention, I love it because that's when you got a connection, you know what I'm saying? So let me just spit it out here. I was walking around, he goes, hey, he talks different, prison talks different, okay? I'm not going to go into all that, but he goes, and I said, what's up? And he told me, yeah, man, the white boy's over here on the corner right here, right? And I go, yeah, we got the table over here and shit, It's our table spot, it's our spot white boys kick at. And so I go, yeah, man. He goes, well, I just want to let you know, man. Remember, he goes, Johnny Cochran just got OJ out of prison, out of all that situation. And I go, yeah, cool. He goes, that's my lawyer. And I go, what? I go, what? I go, that's your lawyer, huh? I go, that's your lawyer. He goes, yeah, he goes, I just want to let you know, man, because you're cool, man. I go, because he heard about me, right? Man. Anyway, the cat got out of the bag somehow. I don't know what happened, but I was like, people love me and shit, and I'm like, wow, fuck, here I go. So he told me, he goes,
Pratt.
Yeah, Geronimo Pratt, man. I love that man. He is like a most humble dude I ever. When I went around him, I'm just like, it's like kicking back in a hammock, dude, and having him talk to me like, fuck. I love this. He's so cool, man. And he broke it down. He broke down the whole story.
Stanley.
What?
Yes.
Do you know who Geronimo Pratt is?
No, I heard of it, but I don't know.
All right, we're going to leave that right there for a minute, but I'm going to tell you something. See, as far as I'm concerned, I just turned 71 years old on the 8th of July.
Amen.
Me, Jet, Cicero, Casey Jolly, and we took over the penitentiary. I'm going to leave that right there, and I'm going to go up here and take a little a short break, and we come back. Y'all hold on a minute, man. I'm going to mute you back to stuff. Y'all hold on a minute. We'll be right back and carry on part 3, okay? Y'all hold on a minute. Let's see where we at. Here we go right here.
Let me make sure I got this one right also. Someone tells you that you must pay them money about your children in the form of child support. They also say they would suspend your driver's license. And they said they would garnish your wages. Who were they talking to? A debtor? Or did they make the mistake and say it to a creditor? When you got married, they say they was a part of that also. Request my free report at tarhakadebtelimination.org. That's tarhakadebtelimination.org. Let's have some fun. Fill out the contact us form for my free report, and I'll rush it straight to your email box. What about this banking stuff? What's going on in the United States? I tell you what, request my free report at tarhakadebtelimination.org. Peace.
All right, gentlemen, we back. Your phone lines are open. Where you at in California, man? Are you with me? Okay,
Yes, I guess
probably are. Okay, exactly where are you in California?
Yeah, he sounds like he's in the South. I mean, not sound like it, but I'm saying when I mentioned Glendale, he had to be in the South.
Okay. Well, the closest I got out there was up there in Houston, Texas in 1986.
Yeah, I like that place. Yeah, I like Houston, man. Houston, my favorite city. My number one favorite city.
I loved it in Houston. It was fantastic.
Yes,
but Stan, I'm going to tell you something now. You know me and you went to school together, right?
Yes.
What you didn't know is I have a sister that nobody that went to school with us had ever seen. And you would think that we were twins. No, she lived in California. Then I had another in New York City and another one in Tallahassee.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the one in California, I ain't calling her name, but when she come to town, you would think the President of the United States is coming. With the limousines, the motorcycle cops and the flags and all. But that's my baby. When you look at us, you think you looking at two identical twins. I never told anybody about that. And the only time she came to town one time when mature mama was pregnant with her last child. She comes down here with the, you would think it was the United States military, the National Guard, United States, the CIA. He said, I came to get you. I ain't doing it, goddammit. Get over here. You better stop having all these babies. Don't you want to be rich? I said, no. Go on back with you. But I love my baby, man. But anyway, what else you got to put on us, man?
Nah, man, it's all good here because this is a golden opportunity here for the African-American community or for anybody, really, because the education system been jacked up for a long period of time. Since about 1980, we used to be in the top 5 in education in the free world. Today, look at us today. We close to about 25th on the list. Most of the countries that's when it comes to education are the Asians because they put more hours into education. Not that they are smarter. They just put more energy into it. Yes, we used to be the same way before we got we bought that bamboozle. Before we bought that bamboozle, of immigration. Yes.
All right, well,
Because,
let me ask you something now.
yes.
All right, now. Now, this brother here, he out there in California.
Right.
Remember I told you, I just turned 71 in this July. Now, you know as well as I know when Malcolm X came here in real life, and we seen it. You know when what is the name? Black Panther Party come down here and they try to kill him and run him up out of town and keep him being killed. You remember when this stuff happened, man, down here. But what I want to ask the brother at area code 408, do you know or have you seen with your own eyes Hugh P. Newton and Bobby Seale? Hello?
You talking to me?
Yeah.
Oh, no, I know. No. Except for...
No, Stanley, I'm not talking to you. I'm talking to the brother out there in California. He probably didn't. He sounds like a young man. He don't remember that kind of stuff. But let me ask you something. At area code 48, you still with us? He's not with us, so I'm going to go ahead and shut his mic down. Hold on a minute. All right, and Stanley, do you remember when Malcolm X came to Jacksonville, Florida? Do you remember that?
Not as a child. I know about the history. I just know about the history, but no. He came to Jacksonville, but he was low key because he went on down to St. Augustine.
Yeah. But he came right down here, smack dab, up in here, the east side, south side, over here
right.
where I live. All
that is
that
true.
right there.
That is true.
Yeah. Okay, now do you remember when Sam Cooke and the Soul Stirrers was over there on the east side? Remember that?
No. Only know that Sam Cooke is from Miami. Because of my brother, my older brother.
Okay, well, Sam Cooke was right here, right there on the east side. Now, I'm going to tell you something else, too. In 1964, Hurricane Dora had a direct hit on us in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
The Beatles, remember that group?
Yes.
They were supposed to perform in Jacksonville, but the hurricane hit and struck it all the way down, and after it got over with, the Beatles come back out in 1964.
Mm-hmm.
That was the worst storm in our recorded history as far as our city is concerned, because it was a direct hit. That sucker was pulling up gigantic trees from the roofs and laying them down. You had whole houses that went into the Atlantic Ocean when that thing came. But anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little quick break, and when I come back, then we'll be ready to go. Okay?
Yes. Yes.
Hold a minute, Stanley.
Woman, come sit down next to me. I got something I want to say to you. I'm just crazy about your love. crazy about your love. I've been so busy, haven't had much time to say. How much I need you in a very special way. Oh, woman, you mean so much to me. It's as simple as 1, 2, 3. Yes, I'm crazy about your love. I've been so busy, haven't had much time to say. How much I need you in a very special way. Come sit down next to me. I got something I want to say to you. I'm crazy about your love. Crazy about your love. You know I'm crazy. Crazy. I'm crazy. Crazy about your love, babe. Yes, I'm crazy. Crazy. Yes, I'm crazy. Crazy about your love, child. Get a little low sometimes. Lord knows I get crazy. Crazy, baby. Crazy about your love, baby. I get crazy. Crazy. Crazy about your love, baby. I get crazy. Oh, I'm crazy. I get crazy. Crazy about your love, baby. Lord, so good to me. Can't help but get crazy. I just get crazy. Crazy about your love, baby. I get crazy. Oh, so crazy. Crazy, crazy. Crazy about your love, baby. I get crazy. Crazy, baby. Crazy, baby. Crazy about your love, baby. Crazy. Oh, so crazy. I'm all confused, and I don't know what to do. I still can't get over loving you. I've had time, but I can't get you off my mind. No, I still can't get over loving you. Every time I run into your friends, I just have to ask them with who and where you've been. And when they tell me what I really didn't want to know, it only breaks my heart and makes me want you more. When I hear your name, I get more insane, 'cause I still can't get over loving you. I can't turn it loose, though I know it's self-abuse. I still can't get over loving you. I've tried to get involved with someone new, but it's just no use, 'cause I expect them to be like you. Baby, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Every girl I date resembles you. Oh, help me, baby. I'm going crazy. I still can't get over loving you. No, tear my heart apart, 'cause I still can't get over
baby. Not your fault if you don't feel the way I do. And even though I wish that you still love me, it still won't change the way I feel for you. Girl, I can't forget, it's not over yet. I still can't get over loving you. Every breath you take, I'll be watching you, girl. I still can't get over loving you. There's no way that this thing is through. No, I still can't get over. Not yet. I ain't through loving you. I'm getting mad, girl. Don't you ever try to leave. No, no. It'll be the last thing you'll ever do.
All right, we're back. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to open up the line at area code 48 and see if you got something else to say. Area code 48, you on there? What else you got, man? Down there. You still with me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you something now. Do you, okay, now, I know when we was over there in the 7th and 8th grade before, you know, the busing thing, and we went over there to Stanton and all of that there. What is your highlights over there at James William Johnson that you think is noteworthy and that we need to remember?
Now, when you say, I didn't attend James Weldon Johnson. Now, unless you're talking about the park.
All right. What about Stanton Senior High School?
Okay, when I went to Stanton, it was great. I went there in the 10th grade. Then I went to Reebok, but it was cool. Everything was cool. Had great teachers. I mean, and then they also, that's when they started doing the changing with the Caucasian coming to the school because of the race thing they were dealing with.
All right.
On that part. But other than that, that's about it.
When you was over there at Stanton, because I know I was there, do you remember the day that Snake at the blocking home come around it by the lunchroom trying to shoot at a man and shot that girl in the face? Do you remember that?
Okay, I remember that. Yeah, I definitely remember that. Yes. Yes. Yes, I was in the 10th grade because I only went to Stanton in 10th grade. Yeah, I remember that because I was in the lunch room when I heard about it.
You was in there when it happened?
No, when I heard about it, I was in the lunchroom. That's when I was brought aware of it. So, no, I wasn't there. So that's where it happened? Because I thought that's where it happened at. What I remember. But I remember that someone told me that was real.
He come out the blocking home.
Mm-hmm.
And he had already got kicked out of school and all that right there. But he come around there to the lunchroom with a 38 in his hand.
Yeah, that was very popular during that time.
Shoot another man. But when he pulled the trigger, this girl had just walked up in the line. You had a whole line, you know, you used to have a line and stuff. They shot her in her cheek with a 38, and she fell down. the entire school system erupted, coaching them. They run out there, jumped in the cars and stuff, and they were running around. They had guns in their hand looking for that boy. And
right.
lucky,
That's weird.
fortunately, the Popo got to him before coaching them got to him. Because what coaching them were going to do, as soon as they seen him, they was going to kill him on sight. But
Well, that's the way it's supposed to go down.
Yeah.
That's the way it's supposed to go down. That's what we missing today.
Tell me about that.
That's why the crime. Huh?
Tell me about it.
Well, when I was coming up, that was the village. That was the village, man, mentality. And crime, see, when I was coming up, especially during that time, you could go sleep in your car. And your car and you would still be there in the moment.
That's right.
That's how things work. Yeah. So, yeah, that was that's the way it needs to be done. That's the way the Muslims address issues. That's why you don't hear all that crap going on with them.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm going to tell you something. One day, me and my partner, both, we were out riding, we had nothing to do. We had got out of high school and stuff. We had some weed, we had all our paraphernalia and all right there.
Mm-hmm.
We got right there on Sutel and Norfolk. Man, you talk about somebody high, I would say you could fly a kite that high and fell asleep right there at the red light. And when we woke up, it was like 2.5 hours that we had been sitting there. And look, we didn't go to jail.
Right.
When I woke up, I said, oh, my goodness. I looked at the watch. I said, man, we been here for 2.5 hours. He said, okay. Don't tell nobody. Let's go home.
Yeah.
In 1973. Oh, my goodness. It's incredible. But anyway, what else? Because we're coming down to the conclusion about mental cognitive dissonance of those who believe they are black people. What is your take on the mental state of our people, man, based on what you see?
The miseducation of the Negro is wide open. Now, people that's younger than post-civil rights, they have no idea what's going on because they don't understand the concept of the village. See, because African Americans, when we come up, like I said, at the end of Jim Crow, well, the doctors and lawyers and everybody lived in the community, and everybody kind of looked out for each other. Yes, but once we come out of civil rights, some of us, what we call the bougie African Americans, they moved with the Caucasians in the Caucasian community. And you know, the Caucasian ain't never loved them, but that was the law. That was the only reason why they was in there, because other than that, they would have killed them. But the law saved them. So they separated themselves, called division. Most of them was pastors. Yeah, a lot of pastors and teachers didn't really change until really 2000. But a lot of pastors at the hood during that time moved out. Yes, and they even took the church with them too, and the intellectual capital. A lot of people don't talk about that, but that's what we're talking about today when it comes to the school system. The intellectual capital, we are not taking advantage of it to the extent of what we can do for ourselves. But that's because of our leadership, African American leadership. And most of the time it's politicians, faith-based, right, and a few educators. Yes, because the African-American educators, they so darn bougie. All they want is the money. They don't care nothing about the students, especially African-American students. Because it's a crying shame, man. It's a crying shame.
Okay.
With the amount of money that we spent in the condition that we are in.
All right, well, hold on, Stanley. I got a caller with his hand raised at area code 408. Area code 408, tell us who you are, what you comment or question. 408, you're on the air. Okay, don't hear nobody. Go ahead, Stanley.
Yes, but that's what really have to it when we, especially when you talk about Jacksonville with the consolidation, when Earl Johnson, Sally Mathis, and Alton Yates sold out the community along with some pastors, and it's been discombobulated for 54 years. But still, and there's no reason for it because racism is alive and well. Let me put that on the books. It's alive and well, but it's not number one on the list no more. Ignorance is the number one thing. Because when you're spending that kind of money and you have nothing to show for it, you can't blame anybody but yourself. Now, they're African-American. There's a few African-Americans that are making money, and they're not making that much money because I have the numbers. I have the data. But when it comes to right here in Jacksonville, we don't control absolutely nothing as a race of people. Thank you.
All right, well, hold on a minute. And I'm trying to go over here for a minute and deal with some stuff. And after this is over with, you let me know what you think, okay?
Yeah.
There was a deliberate decision to destroy blacks and to bring them down into the pits of American society. And this decision, or more precisely, these decisions were made starting in the 1600s. And most people don't know why this happened, but you're going to be well aware of who made those decisions and why they made those decisions after you finish watching this video. So to get into the subject, we're going to go into this book here. It's called The Shaping of Black America by historian Mr. Lerone Bennett Jr. And so I want you to pay attention as we go on this journey. Now let's go on here to page 62, where it says this: fork by fork, step by step, option by option, America, or to be more precise, the men who spoke in the name of America decided that it was going to be a white place defined negatively by the bodies and the blood of the reds and the blacks. And as we go on, he's going to show how these men of power decided to do this and why. Let's continue. And that decision, which was made in the 1660s and elaborated over a 200-year period, foreclosed certain possibilities in America, perhaps forever, and set off depth charges that are still echoing and re-echoing in the Commonwealth. And so what are the possibilities that these decisions may have potentially closed off forever in America? One of them is the country ever being completely united. And another is a certain segment of blacks never rising above the permanent underclass position in America, which Dr. Claude Anderson also talks about. And so these possibilities may be cut off forever, at least for the rest of the country's existence, because of some of these foundations that the country was built upon. Now let's continue. What makes this all the more mournful is that it didn't have to happen that way. There was another road, but that road wasn't taken. In the beginning, as we have seen, there was no race problem in America. And that's because the idea of race, it wasn't a dominant worldview in early America, especially amongst the common people. They had to be conditioned to see the world through the racial lens. Here we go. The race problem in America was a deliberate invention of men who systematically separated blacks and whites in order to make money. And that's what fueled the idea of race. It was money. And the few figured out how to exploit the many and to get power and to make profits. And that's it, right? When you understand the game, that's it. They created this game almost 400 years ago, and they still have people today emotionally racked up in this game that they created, right? To deliberately exploit people. And that's crazy to me when you think about it. And the people who take on the identity of black, they were set up to be the biggest losers in this game, right? And they're the ones who are the most emotionally attached to playing this game, which is why for those of you who are climbing out of the pit, the one thing you have to do is get away from this black identity, and you have to get your mind out of the racial worldview, because that game is stacked for you to lose. Let's continue. This was, as Kenneth Stamp so cogently observed, a deliberate choice among several alternatives. Slavery, he said, cannot be attributed to some deadly atmospheric miasma or some irresistible force in the South's economic evolution. The use of slaves in Southern agriculture was a deliberate choice among several alternatives made by men who sought greater returns than they could obtain from their own labor alone, and who found other types of labor more expensive. They weren't going to get out there in the field and work, and just like any other business based on capitalism, they were looking to lower their expenses and to increase their returns. And they found the Negro slave to be the most appropriate for the job, as we're going to find out, and for many obvious reasons, which we're also going to go over. Let's continue reading. It didn't have to happen that way. Back there, before Jim Crow, before the invention of the Negro or the white man or the words and concepts to describe them, the colonial population consisted largely of a great mass of white and black bondsmen who occupied roughly the same economic categories and were treated with equal contempt by the lords of the plantations and legislatures. Now, this is talking about the earlier years in the American colonies. They were in the process of working out the system for the society, where at that time they treated the European servant similar to the Negro slave and servant. Let's continue reading. Curiously unconcerned about their color, these people worked together and relaxed together. They had essentially the same interests, the same aspirations, and the same grievances. They conspired together and wagged a common struggle against their common enemy, the big planter apparatus, and a social system that legalized terror against black and white bondsmen. No one says and no one believes that there was a Garden of Eden in colonial America, but the available evidence, slight though it is, suggests that there was widening bonds of solidarity between the first generation of blacks and whites. And this was another thing that they had discovered that the rulers had to put an end to, because this degree of unity and solidarity had the potential to grow into something that would have potentially jeopardized what these rulers had in mind and the goals of the leaders in those colonies. Let's continue. And the same evidence indicates that it proved very difficult indeed to teach white people to worship their skin, or more precisely to teach English, Irish, and other European people to drop those identities and to think of themselves as white, right? As white people, which was introduced in the 1600s, and to value this idea of whiteness above all other things. Let's continue. All this began to change drastically in the 6th decade of the 17th century, 1600s. The decade of the 1660s. This was the first great fork in the making of black America. Now, what does he mean by that? The great fork in the making of black America. When you look at a fork, it starts off on one end as a single road, and then when you get to the other end of the fork, it starts to break off into these multiple roads. And one of these roads leads to the very bottom in the pits of society. And it is this road that the colonists forced the blacks to travel down. They set up the society to herd black people like cattle to go down this road that leads to the very bottom of the pit. That's the making of black people and the making of black America. And you have to understand this. Here we go. For it was at this fork that certain men decided to ground the American economic system on human slavery. To perceive the importance of that fork, it is necessary first to travel the roads that lead to it, roads that were not taken. The first road, a road never seriously considered, although it was open, at least for a while, was the road of fraternal cooperation with the Americans, i.e. the Indians, in a program of free and creative development of the immense resources of the American continent. This obviously would have required consummate diplomacy and an abandonment of the peculiar European ideas that Europeans were divinely ordained to appropriate the resources and alter the institution of non-Europeans. It would have involved, in other words, the transformation of both Americans and Europeans and the creation of a new synthesis made up of the best elements of both configurations. This road, the only road to justice, was rejected out of hand by the white founding fathers, who adopted a policy of genocide. This was one of the forks on the road, right? To find a way to cooperate with the natives and to make cultural adjustments to create a just society where everyone in that society can win. But the colonizers were way too greedy and cunning to make such compromises and to travel down that road. Let's continue. The second road, also rejected, was a free and cooperative system of labor for all immigrants. This would have involved, at a minimum, an abandonment of the European principles of masters and servants, and would have required all men to live by the sweat of their brow. Because the Europeans were already hooked on the master principle, because they could never somehow get over the idea that it was necessary for somebody else to work for them, this road was not taken. And the decision not to take that road left only two alternatives: temporary servitude and eventual freedom for all workers, red, black, and white, and the road of permanent servitude based on the work of one or possibly all three of the subordinate labor groups. Now, did they go down the road of creating freedom for all workers, or did they go down the road of creating permanent servitude? Let's find out. The last road was taken, and one group was singled out for permanent servitude. And who is this group? Negroes, who they created as black people. They deliberately took them down the dark alley where the light doesn't shine. That's where they took the Negro consciousness, right? All the way down into the pit for the purpose of making it stay down there permanently. Understand. Why? To answer that question, we must back up again and consider the groups not selected. First, the Indians. A popular idea to the contrary notwithstanding, the Indians were enslaved in all or most of the colonies. But Indian slavery and servitude created problems that colonists preferred to deal with in other ways. To begin with, there was the problem of security. It was difficult to keep Indian servants and slaves from running away because they knew the country and could easily escape to their countrymen, who were only a forest or river away. Another and possibly more persuasive argument against large-scale enslavement of Indians was that the supply was relatively limited. Finally, and most importantly, Indian servants and slaves were members of groups with a certain amount of power. These groups could and did retaliate. For this combination of reasons, it was considered unwise to enslave large groups of Indians, who were usually sold into slavery in the West Indies. So they could easily run away and find themselves in the familiar terrain. They were relatively small in number and they could retaliate, right? Which made them not the ideal slaves. Here we go. From the standpoint of the masters, the poor whites of Europe presented equally serious problems. The supply of poor whites, like the supply of Indians, was limited. And poor whites, like Indians, but for different reasons, could escape and blend into the whiteness of their countrymen. The most serious problem, however, was that poor whites had tenuous but nonetheless important connections with the circuits of power. There were pressure groups in England that concerned themselves with the plight of poor whites. And so they had people speaking on their behalf back home in England and putting pressure on the government. And so there was no way that these colonists in America could legally get away with making them permanent slaves, although they definitely would have if they could have gotten away with it. Let's continue. This fact alone drastically limited the options of colonial masters. For in order to safeguard the relatively limited supply of poor whites, it was necessary to make costly, from the standpoint of the masters, concessions to white servants and to improve their living conditions. So the Europeans were also limited in number. They could escape and they can blend in with the other free Europeans. And they had groups back home that were speaking on their behalf, right? And all this caused problems and interfered with the goals of the colonists on the American soils. And so what did they have left? Negroes. Now here we go. The last group, the group finally selected, did not have these disadvantages, as Oscar and Mary F. Handlin noted. Farthest removed from the English, least desired, the African communicated with no friends who might be deterred from following. Since his coming was involuntary, nothing that happened to him would increase or decrease his numbers, meaning that it didn't matter how hard they worked the Negroes or how long the Negroes served, because they didn't come by choice, which was different from many of the Europeans outside of the convicts or the people that were kidnapped. The other Europeans came by choice. Let's continue. To raise the status of Europeans by shortening their terms would ultimately increase the available hands by inducing their compatriots to immigrate, which is saying that if the Europeans heard that the terms were shorter, they would be more willing to sign up in a labor contract, right? Here we go. To reduce the Negro's term would produce an immediate loss and no ultimate gain, meaning that there was no benefit to reducing the Negro from being a permanent slave to a limited time slave, because they didn't come on their own will. They didn't need to be incentivized to come over to America because they were getting captured by the slave raiders, right, and then sold to the merchants. And this was against their own will. So this would have been a loss to the colonial masters. And in other words, they would have had to stop thinking from the view of an extreme capitalist and think more from the view of a humanitarian, which they were most definitely unwilling to do, right? Let's continue. By mid-century, the servitude of Negroes seemed generally lengthier than that of whites, and thereafter the consciousness dawns that the blacks will toil for the whole of their lives. Unhappily for the African, they had none of the disadvantages of the Indian and poor whites, and they had, again, from the standpoint of the planters, distinct advantages. And what were some of these distinct advantages of the Negro? I'm glad you asked. Let's find out. They were marked by color, and hence could not escape so easily. That's the first distinct advantage. They had the rich brown skin, not the black skin. They had the rich brown skin, and they could not blend in with anyone. And this is what the thinking colonists clearly noticed. And so the idea was to make that brown skin color the symbol of the slave, so that just by the sight of that rich brown skin color, it was supposed to signal to the unconscious mind of the people within that society that that person is the slave, right? As soon as they saw it, the trigger's supposed to go off and it's supposed to know that's the slave, right? This is the conditioning process and the conditioning of the mind of the people, right? They wanted to permanently link that skin color with being a slave, right? And that's including in the mind of the Negro too, right? And so this was the first distinct advantage of using the Negroes, right? Here's the next one. The supply seemed inexhaustible, and the labor of Africans was relatively inexpensive when compared with the cost of transporting and maintaining white indentured servants for a limited number of years. And the African slave raiders, they caught so many Negroes that it could make someone's head spin. They caught and rounded up Negroes by the millions, right? They operated these huge businesses for the sole purpose of capturing these vulnerable people from these various tribes. And who benefited from this? The African rulers, right? It wasn't the common tribal people who were the ones who were doing this. It was the African rulers and the staff that they had working for them. They were just as malicious as the European colonists. And so I place both of these in the same category. And I'm quite certain that the African rulers, if they had the opportunity to make more money, they would have came over here to America and they would have had no problem further pushing down the Negro's consciousness into the pit. No problem whatsoever, because it's a character thing, right? It's not a color thing. And malicious character traits have the potential to be expressed by all humans. Understand this. And on top of that, those African rulers and those people who work for them, they didn't see the people that they were rounding up as their people, right? We have to get away from these utopias and we have to face reality and stop placing these modern ideas and lumping them back into the minds of people living 500 years ago, because they didn't think like that, right? They did not think like that. And that's why they were able to supply an inexhaustible, inexpensive supply of vulnerable people to the European merchants, right? Let's continue reading. This last fact was decisive, and it was clearly understood by colonists as early as 1645. And this is talking about the English. Pay attention. This was already clear in the minds of the Portuguese and the Spanish decades prior, but it took the English a little longer to catch on. Here we go. It was in that year that Emmanuel Downing sent a famous letter to his brother-in-law, John Winthrop, saying, among other things, if upon a just war the Lord should deliver Narragansett Indians into our hands, we might easily have men, women, and children enough to exchange for Moors, which will be more gainful pillage for us than we conceive. For I do not see how we can thrive until we get a stock of slaves sufficient to do all our business. For our children's children will hardly see this great continent filled with people, so that our servants will still desire freedom to plant for themselves, and not stay but for very great wages. And I suppose you know very well how we shall maintain 20 Moors cheaper than one English servant. 20 Africans for the price of one English servant? How could a Puritan resist such a deal? They couldn't resist it, right? Which is why they went that route. Let's continue. And how could he overlook the final and deciding factor? And what is this final deciding factor? I'm glad you asked. Here it is. The Africans were vulnerable. Now, what does it mean to be vulnerable? That means to be emotionally or to be physically exposed to the attacks of other people, right? And so they were vulnerable during their capture and also vulnerable during their arrival to the new land, right? Here we go. There were no large power groups nearby to retaliate in their name, like the Native Americans had. They didn't have that, so they were vulnerable. And what else? Nor did they have the power groups on the international scene to raise troublesome questions, like the Europeans had. There were no groups standing out on the behalf of the captured Africans that had a voice on the international scene. And so therefore, they were vulnerable. Here we go. They were, in fact, naked before their enemies, and their enemies were legion, right? Everywhere they looked, to the left and to the right, enemies were all around, right? From the African slave catchers all the way over to the European slave masters, all playing a hand in dragging the Negro consciousness all the way down into the pit. Let's continue. As the pointer of the roulette wheel neared the African number, the power brokers of England suddenly and dramatically increased the odds against Africans by announcing a new policy of restricted white immigration and massive support of the African slave trade. With the formation of the Royal African Company, 1672, the wheel of fate came to an abrupt halt before the black square. From henceforth, as James C. Balla has pointed out, it would be the policy of the King and the Duke of York, who stood at the head of the Royal African Company, to hasten the adoption of slavery by enactments cutting off the supply of indentured servants at the same time that large importations of slaves were made by their agents. But we must take care here to preserve perspective. Ballag is suggesting, as others suggested before and after him, that history or some impersonal force decided for the colonists. But history is made by men and not by circumstances. And I would add that it's a combination of both. The circumstances in combination with the men. They both make it together. Here we go. If history created the circumstances and the alternatives, it was still left to men in the colonies to choose between the alternatives, which is very true, because when the circumstances are created, it's still the human's role to decide what they're going to do in that circumstance. And the colonists, they made their choice, which was to enslave, right? Here we go. That happened in the first instance in isolated areas in the menacing decades of the 1640s. In that decade, certain men in Maryland, Virginia, and Massachusetts began holding certain Africans in lifetime servitude. There are some indications that this was a deliberate gambit on the part of designing men who wanted to force a favorable legal decision in favor of slavery. If so, the gambit had its desired effect. For the first legal enactment in favor of slavery in the colonies came in 1641 in Massachusetts, which declared in its body of liberties that there shall never be any bond slavery, villanage, or captivity amongst us, unless it be lawful captives taken in just wars, and such strangers as willingly sell themselves or are sold to us. This was, all things considered, a fateful and ominous unless, for the following words clearly authorized African, Indian, and European slavery. Once the genie was out of the bottle, there was a more or less deliberate effort to create a legal structure for slavery, a fact noted by Herbert S. Clay, who said, once these first hints about the existence of a status of slavery within the colony of Virginia has been made by the legislature, there seems to have developed at this point a conscious effort on the part of the Virginians to create a statutory framework on which to firmly base this condition. This effort unfolded roughly in 4 stages. Pay attention, because it's about to go into the plot on how they created the game and set it up to destroy the blacks. The first stage is this. The first stage, linked in part with the Massachusetts precedent, was the extension of the term of black servants from a specific number of years to life. Lifetime servitude is the first stage. And Dr. Winthrop D. Jordan, in his book Black Over White, he says that the English, they had been in constant contact with the Spanish and the Portuguese, so they were already familiar with this practice of lifetime servitude before they put it into practice, right? Here we go. Following Massachusetts on this point were Connecticut in 1650, Virginia in 1661, Maryland in 1663, New York and New Jersey in 1664, South Carolina in 1682, Pennsylvania and Rhode Island in 1700, North Carolina in 1715, and Georgia in 1755. They were all in it together, right? Here we go. The second and more momentous stage, a stage that marked the institutional divergence of servitude and slavery, was the introduction of the principle of heredity. And what's heredity? In this case, it's referring to the slave passing on their status to the children that they have. And so the idea, because these are human ideas that are made manifest in the physical world, the idea was that the children of the slaves would be born into this world already cast into the status and position of being a slave. And this was to go on forever, right? Let's keep reading. Virginia pioneered in this development, declaring in December 1662, whereas some doubts have arisen whether children gotten by an Englishman upon a Negro woman shall be slave or free, be it therefore enacted and declared by this present Grand Assembly that all children born in this country shall be held, bond or free, only according to the condition of the mother, which is another idea that's taken from the mind of the colonist, right? Because in nature, these ideas don't exist. Nature doesn't have any laws or any books that say the children follow the status of their mother. These are human inventions, right, coming from their imagination, and then being passed as laws and then turned into realities for the society. And why do they choose the status to follow that of the mother? Because when the English and the Negro had children, the mother was often the slave. And so they cast the children off to the side of the slaves so they can keep the free English side as pure as possible and as recognizable as possible, which when you think about it, it makes sense and it's reasonable from their perspective and to achieve the goals and the objectives that they had in mind, right, from their side. Now let's continue reading. This raised more questions and doubts than it answered. For what precisely was a Negro? And what was the child of a Negro man and a white woman? And what in the world was a white person? Was it a matter of blood or culture or Christianity? The third phase of the process, defining slavery and providing a rationale for the system, was involved almost entirely with the farcical or ridiculous quest for answers to these questions. The first question requiring attention was the question of religion. For religion and not race was the first rationale for slavery. This caused no end of problems for colonial masters, for it was an axiom of their faith that freedom in Jesus Christ was real. More to the point, The whole colonization crusade of the colonists was based on the idea of carrying the word to the heathens. And remember that these are just justifications for the things that they really wanted, which was wealth and the control over people, right? And so all the colonizers used religion at some point as a tool for their conquest. Let's continue reading. How then could they deny freedom to a heathen who had seen the light? And someone who had seen the light was someone who accepted Jesus as their Savior. That simple slave religion, right? And how were they to deny the freedom to the people who had converted? Just watch, because you're going to find out how. The answer, as usual, was both practical and profitable. Baptism, to quote Balag again, thus involved a dilemma. If conferred, it sealed the pious end of slavery, but freed the Christian slave. And this was a problem because they were not coming there to the New World for the purpose of just converting people, right? They needed workers. They needed workers so they can get wealthy. Let's continue. On the contrary, if enfranchisement was a possible result, Christianization was certain to be retarded or completely stopped. The wisdom and the conscience of colonial assemblies were equal to the emergency. They held both to their justification and to their slaves. Their justification was their religion, and their slave was the Negro, and they held on to both of them. But how? The Virginia Assembly in a law of 1667 presents but a typical example of a general colonial action. It settled the question by the naive declaration, worthy of the metaphysician, that rightly separates the spiritual person from bodily form. Baptism doth not alter the condition of the person as to his bondage or freedom, meaning that becoming a Christian didn't free someone from being a slave. This was the concern that many of the masters had during this time, who didn't want to Christianize their slaves, right? Due to the fear that this Christianization would cause many of them to have a free status or be eligible to be free. And the courts declared that this did not free anyone. And here's the rest of the quote from the courts. In order that diverse masters, freed from this doubt, may more carefully endeavor the propagation of Christianity, meaning that they could allow their slaves to be converted and they would not have to worry and have doubts that they would become free. Here we go. That settled that, but it did not settle the legal question on who could be enslaved. And in 1670, the Virginia legislature spoke again on the subject, saying, all servants not being Christian imported into this country by shipping shall be slaves for life. Whether by design or by accident, this law accepted blacks who had been baptized in Africa, Europe, or the West Indies, or other colonies. So that law basically included anyone who wasn't Christian. It wasn't very narrow and it wasn't very specific. So some blacks who were previously Christians, they could use this as a loophole. But watch this. But this loophole was eliminated in the Act of 1682, which declared that all servants except Turks and Moors, which shall be brought or imported into this country, either by sea or land, whether Negroes, mulattoes, or Indians, who and whose parentage and native country are not Christian at the time of their first purchase of such servant by some Christian, although afterwards and before such their importation. And so if any one of them were captured and then sold into the hand of the English on American soil, then this is what happened. They shall be converted to the Christian faith, meaning white Jesus is going to be implanted into their minds, and then this happens afterwards. Shall be judged, deemed, and taken to be slaves. And they went into slavery still. And this Jesus that they had got people to worship in wasn't going to do anything whatsoever to save them from that situation. And the colonists clearly understood that, right? That Jesus may have given the enslaved a little bit of hope while they were down in the pit, but that was about it, right? Jesus is not coming back to save anybody, right? At least not the Jesus that they're talking about and interpreting in that way. It's not happening, and we're going to talk about that in other videos. But for now, let's continue reading. In plain English, this meant that all Jews, Asians, and Africans, except Turks and Moors, were subject to slavery in Virginia. It meant also that Virginia was embarking on the process, completed in the 18th century, of basing slavery on race rather than religion. And so they were switching up the game because they had a new target in mind. That target is called the Negro. They had their eyes fixated on the Negro as a meal ticket to financial freedom. Here we go. The Virginia legislature finally said that a Negro was anyone with one Negro grandparent. And who were the ones that were creating these definitions? It was the Virginia lawmakers, the elite, the great planters, right? The governors, the ones that were in positions of power. They were the ones who were defining what a Negro was, right? But guess who was not involved in this process of creating these definitions? Negroes, right? This is going into the creation of a Negro and how they redefined the Negro on multiple occasions. And the Negro had no involvement in it, right? The one-drop rule and all these types of things, these are their ideas, right? Coming from their mind. And guess who today is the #1 promoter of this type of thinking? Negroes, right? They have bought into many of these colonial ideas without knowing why they were created, right? You'll never hear me walking around today calling myself a black person or a Negro, right? Like I said, these are the things that are coming from these people's minds, and they're meant to destroy, and don't have anything to do with me. Let's continue reading. In this manner, Virginia and America crossed a great divide, a divide that requires some elaboration. For what was involved here was the idea of racism, which is not an individual idea or peculiarity, but an institutionalized ideology that commits the institution of a society to the destruction of a people because of race, and eventually leads the most targeted people, Negroes in this case, as becoming full participants in their own destruction as well, right? That's part of the system. Let's continue. The idea developed by Virginians and Americans was simple and profitable. The idea was that all whites were biologically superior to all blacks, who were infidels and heathens, a dangerous and accursed people who embodied an evil principle that made them dangerous to the morals and politics of the community. And that's the idea that they took from their imagination and made into a reality into the eyes of the society, right? When people look out in society, that's how they interpret their reality. And this is including black people who began to believe in this idea of their own inferiority, just like Dr. E. Franklin Frazier said in his book. Let's continue reading. The truth or falsity of this idea disturbed few men then or now. The only thing that mattered was that this idea or something like it was necessary to justify past, present, and future aggression against blacks. With the institutionalization of this idea, the structure of slavery was almost complete. There remained only the fourth phase, a phase that continued for 200 years and involved the destruction of the legal personality of the slave. The first step in this direction was the declaration that the slave was the property of the master, and such the slave could not hold property or engage in trade or commerce. Nor could the slave as a piece of property move without the express consent of his master. He could not leave the plantation without a pass. He could not gather in large groups. He could not commit himself to a marriage vow. More ominously, he could not even defend himself. And this is going into the creation of black people, right? Or the shaping of black America, which first started out as an idea in the mind of these colonizers, right? Who then created an environment for this idea to manifest. And in their minds, a black person was a piece of personal property, something that was to be owned and used, right? And a permanent member of the pits of society. But here we go. In the words of the codes, he was in the condition of a natural person in which, by the operation of law, the application of his physical and mental powers depended upon the will of another, meaning that Negroes were not supposed to think and move based on their own will, right, and their own desires, and that someone else was supposed to do that for them. This was the creation of the Negro consciousness. Understand? Let's continue reading. By these words and acts in these stages, the masters of colonial America committed themselves in America to the institution of human slavery. Having made that decision, the masters had to make another decision, for neither the master nor the servants had been prepared for the new script of roles in the statutes. Nature does not create masters or slaves, nor does it create blacks or whites. And that's right, because humans do that. In order to make masters and slaves, in order to make blacks and whites, it is necessary to kill them. It is necessary to separate them by rivers of blood. But terror alone is not enough. One must condition the mind and the eye and the heart. And the conditioning of one generation must be repeated in the next generation and on ad infinitum. The men who ran colonial America did not shrink from these exigencies. And he's right, because they knew it was a big job, but they also knew that it was a big job that was worth doing, which is why they used so much mental power in constructing the society the way that they did. Here we go. Moving swiftly and ruthlessly, they began in the middle of the 17th century to separate blacks and whites and to create a race problem in America. Most historians avoid the subject by positioning a natural or cultural bias in the European psyche. But this maneuver fails to explain why this natural or cultural bias manifested itself in one way in 1619 and another way in 1819, or why it developed in one way in Maryland, another way in Massachusetts, and a third way in Brazil. Nor is it possible, from the traditional standpoint, to explain why laws against blacks became progressively worse and differed significantly in different demographic and economic situations. From time to time, some historians admit, in so many words, that the traditional view is untenable. Stanley Elkins, for example, who has advanced a fanciful theory of slavery, said that the interests of white servants and blacks were systematically driven apart. After reading the same evidence, the Handlin said that the emerging difference in treatment of blacks and whites was calculated to create a real division of interest between Negroes on the one hand and whites on the other. No one reading the evidence can doubt this, nor can it be doubted that blacks and whites had to be taught the meaning of blackness and whiteness. And blackness obviously meant all the things that were bad, and whiteness meant the opposite, right? Everything that was good. And you have to rise above this so you don't find yourself continuously stuck in this polarity. Here we go. This is not to deny differences in color and hair formation, etc. It is only to say that perceptions had to be organized to recognize the differences, and that men had to be organized to take advantage of them. The so-called differences were not the cause of racism. On the contrary, men seized on the differences and interpreted them in a certain way in order to create racism. And which men did this? The people in the position of power, the ones that are sitting back and have all the time to do all the thinking, right? They're the ones who seized upon these differences for their own self-interest, right? And today people are still caught up playing this very game that these people created, right? Let's continue. Not only did they exploit differences, but they also created differences and preserved them by force and violence. The differences, in other words, were rationalizations and excuses, not the cause of racism. Once established, however, the ideology of rationalizations assumed a calamitous autonomy and influenced the interests from which they derived. Who was responsible for this policy? The white founding fathers, the Byrds, the Mathers, the Winthrops, the Jeffersons, the Washingtons, the heroes of all the 4ths of July. They divided blacks and whites. They sowed the seeds of division and hate and blood. In an attempt to evade the implication of this fact, some men blame the English or colonial public opinion. But colonial public opinion was the public opinion of the planter merchant aristocracy, or the elite class, right? That's what the aristocracy is. As T.J. Wardenbaker, Philip A. Bruce, James Hugo Johnson, and scores of other scholars have pointed out, the colonies were run by a closed set of men who monopolized political, ecclesiastical, and economic power. The system of life built up in the agricultural colonies, James Hugo Johnson writes, resulted in planter control. And the planters are the ones who own the plantations, right? They were the ones who were running the society. Both social and governmental institutions were devices wrought by the planters, or tools used by the planters. The system of Negro slavery may have been thrust upon them by England, but the problems arising from it were first of all the planters' problems. And on the governing class is the responsibility for the system of slave institutions worked out in the colonies. There is a corroboration on this point from another authority, Philip A. Bruce, who says that the whole power of the Virginia society, even in the times when universal suffrage prevailed, was directed by the landowners. That society was composed entirely of the landed proprietors and their dependents. The public sentiment was exclusively the sentiment of men who, like the landowners of England, looked to agriculture for the income which went to the support of their families, and whose only material interests were those associated directly with the soil. Not only did the planters have the power, they also had vested interest in black exploitation. It was on their plantations that the new system of black servitude was tried out for the first time, and by mid-century, as Elkins noted, blacks had accumulated in large enough parcels in the hands of the colony's big planters to develop in those men a vested interest in the new system. The advantages of slave labor, Werdenberger says, were manifest to the planters of the type of William Byrd, who was one of the people using their government position to allocate thousands of acres to himself, or William Fitzhugh, men who had built up fortunes by their business ability. It is but natural that they should have turned early from the indentured servants to stock their plantations with the cheaper and remunerative African workers. Herbert S. Klain adds, the Virginia planter, in his drive for a more economic system of labor, was the first to reduce the Negro to the status of a servant for life. But the judiciary and legislature, which were uniquely representative of and in fact entirely composed of the members of the planter class, were not far behind in taking cognizance of this growing customary law governing the Negro's condition, and they early gave recognition to this whole body of practice. In the face of these testimonies, one can hardly escape the impression that it was the big planters and their allies who reduced the vulnerable and powerless black servants to slavery and enacted legislation that committed every white person in every white institution to support of the new order. How was this all done? That's what we're going to find out on part 2 in the next video, right? How they got the
Everybody, we're back. I'm going to open up these phone lines. If they ain't there, then we just going to roll on down into this thing. Echo 404, are you still with us, man?
Yes.
All right,
yes.
Let me have it. What you got?
Well, after listening to that information, I would recommend to the African American community is to move forward. And the reason why I say that, we don't have time to address 400 years of oppression. Now we have it oppression today, but we have the 13, 14, 15, and 16 Amendment to give us certain rights that we never had before. So this is the golden opportunity to focus on that. Then we can come back when things are much better for the African American community to have that a conversation. And we need to have that conversation with African Americans, not with everybody else. And the Caucasian community need to have a conversation with them because they are the murderers. I mean, it's a fact. So they need to deal with that. They should have enough wealth by now. They should have enough African wealth to carry them for the next 1,000 years. And when it comes to the African American community, they need to be more civic engaged in running their community, state, or country. Thank you.
Okay, well, all right, now, so let me make sure I got this right, Stanley. You are saying that we as people, let's say the black people, African Americans, okay, let's say that, we are supposed to be getting together and unite together. And my question would be, if we do that, where do we need to come together at? Where's the place?
Well, first of all, there's no such thing as all us coming together. I'm talking about the leadership. The leadership should be able to put together once every year an agenda. But there's only really 4 pillars that they need to be concerned about when it comes to the African American community. But you still have to deal with the classism. See, since post-civil rights, classism has become a big issue between African Americans, the haves and the have-nots. And the bougie class, who are the leaders in the community, are happy because they're getting a chicken sandwich. Yes, when it comes to dollars and cents, we are still, see, after slavery, we had control of 0.001% in slavery. Today, we have 0.001%. Nothing have changed. And that's really because of the African American leadership, the bougie African American leaders, or the so-called leaders in the African American community. Now, once again, let me address this disclaimer. Racism, white supremacy, murder is still a problem in America. That's not the main thing holding African Americans back. Now, when we look at our history, we waste too much time with that. There's a time and place for everything. But we shouldn't waste so much time with that. Because right now we need to be concerned about the air, water, shelter, and food. Yes, wherever you are, I'm talking about Africans, or anybody really when it comes to that. But when it comes to really...
Wait a minute now, you mentioned a certain class of people that, in my opinion, I think you think they not on our side, so to speak.
No, it's always been about money. As we listened to the program before I came back online, It's always been about money. Always about money. Yeah. The number 2 would be ethics. Ethics. Ethics always come behind the money. When it comes to any community, you have to find out what your resources are and master those resources. African Americans got all the resources in the world. Because really, we control the music. We control a lot of things. We just don't own it. It's a big difference. A lot of people don't understand.
Wait a minute. Let me ask you this right here. Do you think, Stanley, that there is people in our town or in our city, in our state, that is anti-us that we don't know about? Do you think it's somebody that look like me and you that do something against me and you? Do you think it exists?
Oh, yeah. Just go to in Jacksonville City Council when it comes to African-American politicians. They are more concerned about getting a pension. They're more concerned about getting a pension than taking care of the constituents. Yes.
All right, well, I tell you what, Stanley. I tell you what. Hold on a minute. I'm going to mute your mic, and after this right here, I'm going to bring you back in. I want you to let me know what you think about this right here. Okay? Hold on a minute.
Many people have asked me to talk about the origins of the boule. Why would you use the term boule, black boule? Why y'all saying that? And why a lot of y'all who's making content is against them? Who are they? How did they get started? Why are they a problem to the black community? So let's talk about the black boule and why they have been a problem. We're going to go through some things. So the black boule itself, and we'll put this up on the screen here, it was started in 1904. Now the first black Greek secret society was formed in Philadelphia by Dr. Henry Minton and his 5 colleagues, okay? Now, you see them on the screen. The boule is an acronym for Sigma Pi Phi, and it was formed to bring together a select group of educated black men and women fashioned after Yale's Skull and Bones, right? Now, the Skull and Bones is another secret society. Many of you know about that. Now, the boule historically takes pride in providing leadership and service to black Americans during the Great Depression, World War I and II, and the Civil Rights Movement. So many people say, what could the boule offer America's blacks in the 21st century? So joining the exclusive secret society offered advancement and perks to the select blacks in return for loyalty to its objectives. Now, they believe in the talented 10th. Now, any of you know about the talented 10th, that belief is the best and brightest of black America, which is 10%, should be running to 90%. It's a very elitist mindset. It's wrong. Just because you went to a school don't mean you're smart, because in this day and time, a master's degree don't guarantee you a job. You got a lot of debt, and if you're not smart with the right degree, you're going to have a piece of paper, debt, and it's still going to be broke, right? But this is the process. So they say, while the majority of ordinary blacks were disenfranchised, the boule members, they were doing good. This is historically, okay? Understand that. Boule members live a good life in America. They benefit off the system of racism and white supremacy. And they benefit off of your oppression and my oppression. They benefit from that. Understand. All these ones, Jack and Jill and the Lynx and all these little societies like that, they all tied in. Understand that. Notice that all the ones, they all know each other. They hang with each other. They don't like other black people in. See, the problem that the boule have with people like us and Tariq and Yvette and Tone and Jason Black and Professor Black Truth and anybody else that's speaking out right now against this is that we're not part of the boule. We're not part of their class, and they look at us as a threat to destroy them. Because right now, they don't really have much use anymore, because with the talented 10th mentality, it says you must control the 90%. And they lost control of the 90%. This is why you have Roland Martin, and I got to mention him because he is a Boule member. He told me out his own mouth on Twitter that he's part of the Boule. That's why you see him wearing all this African garb all the time. He's trying to convince you he's black, but we're going to get to that part later, why they do that, okay? So they said that the Archons, which is the male Boule members, and their wives, with 112 chapters, make up the wealthiest group of black men and women on the planet. Now, Archon means demon, but yet that's what they want to be a part of. And they like to keep that hidden. They say, but who does the Boule really serve? Well, you know it don't serve the black community. Now, it serves racism and white supremacy. And as long as the black Boule member conforms to the rules, the richest will be in abundance, if not come down the hatchet. And they state that blackmail is also part of the deal. Now, the Masonic Secret Society has a pyramid style like all the rest. You know about the Masons in that situation. They say the lower ranks are kept from knowing what the upper ranks know. Now, the early 20th century was a period of reconstruction. We put this up on the screen, and you can see this is the Boule members, right? But I want you to notice on the screen you have two white people, and they're supposed to be part of the black Boule. That's intentional while they're on there. Now, Marcus Garvey, the great Marcus Garvey, the greatest of all time, the father of modern and past Pan-Africanism. He laid down the blueprint, okay? So he had his Back to Africa movement, and it was in full swing. And Garvey represented genuine black leadership. In other words, Marcus Garvey represented that 90%. He represented the streets. He represented the grassroots. Now, W.E.B. Du Bois, the founding member of the New York chapter of the Boule, he stated that the Boule was created to keep the black professional away from Marcus Garvey. See, understand, any person that's trying to take black people out of racism, white supremacy, and the freedom, that is a threat to the black Boule. Understand that. The Joy Reids, and now I'm not saying she's in the black Boule, but usually when you see the professionals, they in it, or they clicked in somewhere with it, right? Now, they say the remaking of the house Negro was necessary to institute a group of blacks who had a vested interest in protecting the elite white system. And they say shortly after founding of the Boule was also Marcus Garvey's time of Back to Africa movement, when it reached 1 million plus people without television or radio. Do you understand how significant and how popular Marcus Garvey was at that time period? He had no TV, no radio, and yet he was popular. And he had no Twitter, no Facebook, no Instagram, no YouTube, no nothing, no Messenger, anything, and yet he was that popular. Now, Du Bois emphasized, according to Steve Coakley, the importance to steal the black professional away from Garvey, because an Afrocentric organization that articulated and captured the black professional would give white people no safe haven in the black community. So the Boule, the remaking of the house Negro, was necessary to build up a group of Negroes who had an investment in protecting the white system and produced by whites having stole this land. This is post-Reconstruction. Now, taking away the articulate Negro, now designed to replace them with organized institutions to keep them away from self-improvement. So we find in the same period as the founding of the Boule, the founding of the 4 male Alpha Phi Alpha, Kappa Alpha Psi, Omega Psi Phi, and Phi Beta Sigma, and the 4 female Alpha Kappa Alpha, Delta Sigma Theta, Zeta, Phi Beta, and Sigma Gamma Rho, college-based fraternities and sororities. We also find them at the NAACP and Urban League. Now, I know some people on this page may be part of that organization. And you may say, man, I'm not no Boule. I just joined the fraternity. I'm not part of any of that. You may not be part of the Boule. You may not be. Not to say that you are, but I'm telling you what was created, why it was created, and why all these fraternities have ties to the Boule. Not to say that you are. You may be in it,
You may not be tied in like that. You may not be willing to do the things that they willing to do to sell out black people to be in it. So I don't want to just indict everybody just in case you in a fraternity, because, you know, some of y'all in these fraternities, y'all get real, you know, bothered, like you talking about your kids when you mention the fraternities. I'm just saying. So they say now Du Bois is one of the strongest opponents of Marcus Garvey, and he was an instrumental tool in stopping one of the strongest grassroots movements in the century. What was Garvey's plan, right? We all know this. His plan was to take as many Africans from America and start a settlement in the nation of Liberia, and then help the new nation produce and control their own rubber crops and other industries and natural resources, okay? So Marcus Garvey, he stated that if the oil of Africa is good for Rockefeller's interests, if iron is good for Carnegie Trust, then these minerals are good for us. Why should we allow Wall Street and the capitalist group of America and other countries exploit our country when they refuse to give us a fair chance in the countries of our adoption? That's the same thing I talk about today. Is that you got China in Africa, the United States won't get out, Russia want to be in there, everybody want to be in Africa getting all the resources. Well, what about black Americans? Why aren't we there even making any kind of business? I've talked about this so many times. Marcus Garvey continues to say, why should not Africa give to the world its black Rockefeller, Rothschild, and Henry Ford? He's right. Marcus Garvey understood that we cannot be a people without any kind of power. Wealth brings power, and the wealth is in Africa. Here, you're going to be sabotaged. Look at all the black men that get money. What happens to them in the end a lot of times? It don't end well. Didn't Eddie Griffin say on Vlad TV that they always got to have an asterisk by your name? Because they either got to dirt you up or destroy you on any little thing. That's why when you black men get certain amounts of money, you need to already have your escape plan out of this country, because eventually they may come for you, and when you even get wind of it, you can say, man, I'm out. I'm not going to put up with these people. Now, they said the two house Negroes made a bet that whites would come out on top and give a certain percentage of these greedy Negroes named Boule members the wealth they stole from Africa, right? So they say what's deep is that they didn't believe in African self-reliance and preferred to have whites give them table scraps instead of making the whole pie. Now, you have to understand the Boule represents the weakest element of black people. Understand that. They are the Stephen of Django Unchained. You understand? That's them. They will protect the master. They will do everything they can. They'll fight with other black people and also deceive other black people. Now, as Steve Coakley put it, he said it took a certain type of, well, he said N-word, to form an organization like this. He said, I mean, we just got our, you know what, kicked during Reconstruction. Africa was divided before our very eyes with the Berlin Conference, most of you who know about that. And he said, and this was 50 years before Rosa Parks. Now, he said, the question is, why were these black devils like this? That's what he said. He said, the answer may lie in the fact that the Boule is a Greek organization. And I said that on Twitter. They got mad at me. I said, why you got black people joining the Greek organizations? You can't make an African organization or even a black American organization? Because Greek, that's, you know, for white folks. What's up with that? Oh, they say, oh, he's super woke. Oh, boy, they was mad at me when I made that comment on Twitter. So, continue, he said, it was about selling out brothers and sisters for power and money. Yes, that's what the Boule is about. They do not want to see us come up. See, all this talk about ADOS and black folks breaking away from the Democratic Party. Oh, no, that's bothering the Boule because they are the house Negroes, every last one of them. Now, I say the majority are black lawyers, doctors, engineers, and accountants were members of the secret club. Now, I'm not saying all black lawyers and accountants is part of the Boule. Not saying that, but they say traditionally the people that's in it is tied to that, okay? Now, I say the Boule is another.
All right, we're back. Let's see now. Stanley, what you think, man?
Oh, well, yeah, I have been over that information many times, and I know about them. But just the same way is the big switch that took place between the Democrats and the Republicans. You had the big switch for the budget the boule, if y'all want to call them boule, but I call them bougie, that took place too. Yes, and they talked about it. That was right along during the same time, 1900, the 1900, no, 1920, 1930, during the miseducation of the Negro. All that took place around at the same place. But the boule during Jim Crow was in the community. I will speak when I spoke about them earlier about after post-civil rights, the pastors and all of them, a lot of them in boules too. With them what I call double agents. They Democrats and Republicans. Most of them are undercover Republicans. Talking about them, those pastors, and then you have them, a lot of them boules went to college and all that, but a lot of them are politicians. People lead them out too. But the main point here is that African Americans got to understand what they need to do. The main four things they need to do I'm talking about the leadership. And I'm not talking about the boule leadership. I'm talking about the community leaders. The community leaders have more impact than they know if they would just get organized. And they can create wealth, especially these days in time, especially if you're on the STEAM program. In the STEAM, when it comes to education, talking about STEAM, that's the jobs of the future, and businesses. Number one thing African Americans definitely need to do is to go into business, not jobs. Jobs automatically come when you develop the business. But going back to the boule, they have been around a long time, and that's probably 1 or 2% of African American leaders. And a lot of them, you can see them. The membership is with the Congressional Black Caucus on the national level. Yes, and you know Jesse is in there. Al Sharpton, the guy. Yes, but if you got your numbers together, yes, let me say it again. If you got your numbers together, you could run right over them or anybody else. That's the same way, because America is run by corporations. Where if African Americans want to make an impact, they just stop spending money at Walmart for the day. Stop just spending money at Walmart just for a day to make an impact. The organization is our number one problem, whether we got the bootleg or not. Thank you.
All right, well, I tell you what, we're going to take a little quick break, and when I come back, we're going to carry on, man. Hold on a minute.
against the law for the bank to loan out depositors money to you, how could the bank give you a loan? And if that's the case, how are they able to keep their doors open? And in some cities, they have the biggest buildings in town. What happens to the person who deposits money in the bank? What do they receive outside of nickels and dimes in the form of what's called interest? How can you get paid? Go to TarhakaDebtElimination.org. That's TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Fill out the Contact Us form, and I'll rush you my free report. Let's get down to the bottom of this situation. Let me show you what's going on and how to deal with it. Okay, TarhakaDebtElimination.org.
In the early days of the American West, a unique group of individuals emerged, shattering stereotypes and defying expectations. You want to know what they're called? Who these were? The Black Cowboys. Does the name surprise you? Those of you thinking that cowboys were only whites, think again. Cowboys were skilled horsemen and cattle handlers who played a crucial role in shaping American history, and the best amongst them were blacks. Cowboys like Bill Pickett, undoubtedly amongst the most famous, whose stunts were no less than an action swashbuckling movie star, was black. One of his very exceptional performances, used for subduing a stubborn steer, involved grabbing its horns, twisting its head up, and biting its tender nose or lower lip. This exhibition never failed to evoke an earth-quaking, deafening cry from his admiring audiences. People did talk all day about pretty much nothing else other than Bill Pickett's insane cattle moves. Time was just not enough to talk about all of it. However, the remarkable performances of not only Bill Pickett, but also of other black cowboys, was historically so exceptional that it generated white envy. This all began in the 1820s, when enslaved Africans were tasked with herding cattle, laying the foundation for the term cowboy. As the years wore on, these cowboys became an integral part of the ranching industry, with estimates suggesting that 1 in 4 cowboys were black by the early 1900s. These men and women were renowned for their exceptional horsemanship and cattle handling skills, honed through years of hard work and dedication. They worked tirelessly on ranches and cattle drives, braving harsh weather conditions and treacherous terrains. Black men were among the first cowboys in the U.S. of A. They roped, branded, and saddled up for cattle drives. Some gained fame, such as Bill Pickett, Nat Love, and a whole many others.
I eventually brought up at Dodge City, Kansas, which at that time was a typical frontier city, with a great many saloons, dance halls, and gambling houses, and very little of anything else.
Wrote Love, who was born enslaved in Tennessee, in his 1907 autobiography, The Life and Adventures of Nat Love. Here, the cowboy, Nat Love, recounts stories from his life on the frontier, so cliché, they read like scenes from a John Wayne film. He describes Dodge City, Kansas, a town smattered with the romanticized institutions of the frontier, a great many saloons, dance halls, and gambling houses, and very little of anything else. He moved massive herds of cattle from one grazing area to another, drank with Billy the Kid, and participated in shootouts with native peoples, defending their land on the trails. And when not, as he put it, engaged in fighting Indians, he amused himself with activities like daredevil riding, shooting, roping, and such sports. Though Love's tales from the frontier seem typical for a 19th century cowboy, they come from a source rarely associated with the Wild West. Love was African American, born into slavery near Nashville, Tennessee. The black cowboy, Bill Pickett, credited with creating the bulldogging technique of bringing a young steer to the ground in a rodeo, was featured in a silent film, The Bulldogger, in 1921. However, as time passed, pop culture maliciously erased black cowboys from the Western milieu, creating a misleading image of the Old West as peopled by white men on horseback, riding the lonely grasslands. The library's collections help document a more accurate picture of what cowboy culture and life in the western U.S. actually looked like in the late 19th and early 20th centuries during the cowboy heyday. They include resource guides, newspaper archives, an American Folklife Resource Project, a 2020 concert of old black cowboy songs, books, magazines, photographs, and posters that document the role African Americans played, particularly in the 1870s, when many newly freed black people headed west.
The myth of the cowboy is only one of many myths that have shaped our view of the West in the late 19th century.
Reads the library's introduction to The American West, 1865 to 1900, Resource Timeline.
The stereotype of the heroic white cowboy is far from true, however.
It says further, one quick example, the origins of Home on the Range, the unofficial anthem of the West, are famously muddled, but it's not disputed that the first recording was by a black saloon keeper and former cowboy in San Antonio, who performed it for folklorist John Lomax in 1908. In fact, Lomax's influential publication of 1910, Cowboy Songs and Other Frontier Ballads, traced several standards to black cowboys, including Get Along Little Doggies. The Lomax family collection is housed at the library, as John and his son, Alan, worked directly with the library for more than a decade in recording and archiving American folk songs. But, as much as film stars John Wayne, Roy Rogers, and Gene Autry come to mind when cowboy is mentioned, the first actual cowboys in the Americas were Spanish vaqueros who introduced cattle to Mexico in the 1500s. Early Spanish missionaries played a major role in establishing cattle country in the West and training Native Americans as cattle herders. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 sent white settlers west of the Mississippi, driven by a sense of continentalism, later known as manifest destiny, the belief that white Americans should control a vast section of North America from coast to coast. The War of 1812 and the Mexican-American War in the 1840s were fueled by this belief, with settlers marching further west, warring with Native Americans. In these vast swaths of open terrain, where law enforcement was most often non-existent, cattle were a source of wealth. There was no adequate fencing to pen them in, however. This left cowhands to fend for themselves in open country, keep up with their cattle by horseback, and protect themselves from rustlers and bandits. Thus, the romantic legend of the cowboy was born. A quiet man, capable, tough, honest, respectful of ladies, and possessed of a poetic respect for the land and his horse. In the hugely popular Wild West shows of Buffalo Bill in the late 19th century, the cowboy novels of Zane Grey in the early 20th century, then the Western films and television shows in the mid-century, those cowboys were almost always white. However, that was only part of the picture, though. No history of cowboy culture would be complete without contextualized narratives about the role that Native Americans, African Americans, and Mexicans played. And just hold on a second. Amazing viewers, if you've gotten up to this point in this video, then it would mean that you've actually settled in and are having an interesting viewing already. Offer us your kind support by hitting that thumb button in front of you, share to keep spreading our eye-opening black narrative, and subscribe if you are yet to. Let's get back in. Few images embody the spirit of the American West, as well as the trailblazing, sharpshooting, horseback-riding cowboy of American lore. And although African-American cowboys do not play a part in the popular narrative, historians estimate that 1 in 4 cowboys were black. The cowboy lifestyle...
Scientific Racism, a critical analysis of Malaysians and Australians and the Peopling of America by Nikki Llewellyn. The 1935 document, Malaysians and Australians and the Peopling of America, published by the Smithsonian Institute and written by Alice Acharthi-Leka, shows the early process of reasoning when determining the first peopling in the Americas. The scientific conclusion reached by Alice Acharthi-Leka about the Negro presence in America suggests a bias against Negro peoples. This document also contained blatant academic dishonesty and an overall dismissal of the black presence in America before Columbus. Alice Achartileka, Racism and Rise to Power. When viewing this document, it is important to keep in mind the author's point of view on Negro people and the magnitude of influence Achartileka had on the world of academia. Achartileka was not born in America, but was a child of immigrants who migrated to America from Austria-Hungary and later moved to New York. He became the director of physical anthropology for expeditions sponsored by the American Museum of Natural History. And in 1910, he became the custodian of physical anthropology collections at the Smithsonian Institute. According to the Smithsonian Institute, quote, Achartileka was a curator at the United States National Museum, now the National Museum of Natural History, from 1904 to 1941. Achartileka traveled widely to collect skeletal remains and established the Smithsonian's world-renowned physical anthropology collections. In 1904, he came to head the newly created division of physical anthropology at the National Museum of Natural History, a position he held for the next 40 years, end quote. He also developed the now challenged theory that the first people in America came from Asia across the Bering Strait. What is not readily known about Achartileka is that he believed in a form of scientific racism called eugenics, which held the belief that poor people and people of color were unfit to live. The encyclopedia.
All right, Stanley, you still with me, man?
Yes.
Stanley, you still with me?
Yes.
All right. What you think about that, man?
Oh, that's it. Yeah, man. I have that data. I have that data. Yes, already on file. Ebony, in the 1990s, put together a book. It's about 5 books, thick, very thick books. Have all that information in it.
All right. Well, where we are right now in the United States of America, my question to you is, what do you think that we should be doing right now as a people?
We need to be working on rebuilding the family. Of all the great things we have done in the world, not just in America, but in the world, and bring that information, exactly what you're doing now, bringing good, solid information, because everybody needs to know about the Moors and the great things, because they were the navigators from Christopher Columbus and other nationalities around the world. But it was many others. But the main point is, we don't want to waste all our time looking at history. We need to take that information and apply the good information, because all that history is not true and it's not factual. So you take out the best that you can use that will move your family and your community forward, and you can come back later with your big piece of chicken and learn the rest.
Okay. All right, well, I tell you what. Let's do this right here. On October the 26th, we'll be right over there on Reebok City Drive to the Black Vegan Fest. And don't cost you nothing to come over there. And come in, you gotta pay for nothing. But when you get up over there, we're gonna have live bands. We're going to have professional chefs. We're going to have where you can bring your children with you, man, and they can learn how to plant and grow their own food and all that stuff on October the 26th. And what I'm going to do with you is I'm going to navigate you over there until you be there. Because you're a very, very busy man, and you got all kind of stuff going on.
No, that's not. I'm available for whatever you think is a good thing for the community.
All right. Well, I tell you what. Get over there because they're coming in from all over the United States, and that's where we're going to be at on October the 26th.
Okay.
You might want to mark it on your calendar, and
yes.
We'll be over there. But anyway, hold on a minute. We're going down to the close the broadcast. I'll be right back. Hold on, man. All right, ladies and gentlemen, October the 26th, we will be dealing with the Black Vegan Fest. Okay? Make sure y'all be there. everybody. I hope y'all have gotten something out of the broadcast tonight. I have an old friend of mine, Brother Stanley Scott. He's been on here with me. But now it is time to shut this thing down. And so we got to go and deal with tomorrow and what's that going to bring and all of that right there. However, all you got to do is go to TarhakaDataElimination.org, and if you go online to YouTube, just type my name in there, and when you see the little red box over in the right corner, just click on that right there. That'll take you to my space, and you see everything that we have done. And you can click like, share, you can do a whole lot of stuff if you want to. However, I hope you all got something out of this this evening with these 3 broadcasts, part 1, part 2, part 3. And in my personal attempt to explain something to my people so that they can make themselves free and clear themselves. Okay? Anyway, I'm your host, Tarhaka Amana LB, and I will talk to y'all next time. Y'all on
There's no way to prepare for the impact an accident makes on your life. That's why we've spent 40 years getting ready for that moment when you need compassion and immediate action. The right doctors, investigators, our team of experienced attorneys, and your free consultation is already in place. So if you've been hurt, remember, the FARA safety net is right here to catch you. All you have to do is call FARA and FARA. It's what we built. Jacksonville.
To make switching to the new Boost Mobile risk-free, we're offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
So why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Because you have nothing to lose. Boost Mobile is offering a 30-day money-back guarantee.
No, I asked why wouldn't you switch from Verizon or T-Mobile?
Oh.
Wouldn't.
Because you love wasting money as a way to punish yourself because your mother never showed you enough love as a child?
Whoa. Easy there.
Yeah.
Applies to online activations. Requires port-in and auto-pay. Customers activating in stores may be charged non-refundable activation fees.